Hey everybody, this is Donovan from Springfield Music, and I want to welcome you to Mo Better Bands, which is both a podcast and a YouTube channel where we talk with instrumental music educators in Missouri and Kansas about their programs, their successes, their challenges, and so much more. If there's a topic or an educator that you'd like to hear, drop me an email at donovan@springfieldmusic.com. That's DONOVAN at springfieldmusic.com. Okay, let's get to today's guest.
Okay, today's guest for the Mo Better Bands podcast is Lisa McMahon. And Lisa was recommended from Tim Cart, so I'm really excited to have this conversation today. And Lisa teaches at Parkway, and she was originally hired a couple of years ago to work at Parkway Northeast Middle School. But in the last year, she's transitioned to basically being like a virtual band specialist. So she's been working in that. She's been teaching for 15 years. Her main instrument's flute. And we're going to talk about some really cool topics today, including lesson planning and strategies to get the most out of virtual instruction. So Lisa, welcome to the Mo Better Bands podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is an interesting topic, and I'm excited to ramble on about it.
I'm excited too. I'm really excited about it. You know, I think when a lot of educators think about lesson planning and those types of things, they just tend to kind of write that off because it's such a difficult thing to do for our subject matter. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't have a plan. You know, even though Mike Tyson famously said everyone can have a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Sometimes being an educator is the same way. Like you have a plan and then the kids derail it, but you still got to go in with the plan of what you're trying to accomplish. So I'm going to let you just kind of take that topic and run with it.
This year does feel like a punch in the mouth, to be honest. Just the whole year is just a repeated punch.
Yeah, and maybe south of the mouth, actually. So tell me a little bit about how you structure lesson planning and specifically like the units that you think about for teaching your middle school programs.
So in the past, I have to kind of give a big shout out to my previous employer. I used to work for the Melville School District. They had a big initiative a few years ago to really incorporate STEM and STEAM education into the entire curriculum, 6 through 12. And in my building in particular, they asked for volunteers to go through this intensive training. And I will be very honest, the reason that I did it in the first place was because they kept calling it STEM, and I was going to stomp my foot and be the one that says, no, it should be STEAM and we should have the arts. So I was going to be that person in all of those meetings, and I was. So I have to kind of recognize them for saying, okay, fine, we'll train you on this anyway. And for that particular program, it was a 3-year program. And it really kind of stretched me to start thinking about what are some other things that you can incorporate in terms of technology in your classroom. At the time, I was very old school and I don't need any of this technology and I'm teaching skills and that sort of thing. And it really kind of just got me to think about the fact that if they can play really, really well, but they don't know who Mozart is, are we creating the best musicians that we possibly can? You know, if they can make the All-State Band as a phenomenal player, but they can't talk to you about why music is important to their lives and they don't know what they're getting into, have you done your job as an educator? And it kind of made my head explode a little bit. And the unit I think that Tim was specifically referring to when he spoke with you about it is I designed a unit for 8th grade in particular for that particular program. And it was a marching band design unit and a lot of schools do this where they try to have an 8th grade experience where they, have their 8th graders come join the high school band for an evening and look how great high school band is and marching band is so fun, that sort of thing. A lot of schools do it, and that's smart because it's a really great recruitment tool.
Sure.
I know you guys talk about recruitment on this podcast quite a bit. That's one of the best ways to transition and retain. Anyway, a lot of schools do something like that, but what I was noticing with my kids was that they got a taste for it on one night, but that doesn't really tell them what marching band is, especially modern marching band. It doesn't really tell them how much time it takes and what all goes into it and why it's such a big, ridiculous deal if you quit 3 weeks after band camp starts. They didn't realize that. So I designed this unit that wasn't just teaching all of the aspects of marching band, but it was also getting them to think about the fact that what they're creating is essentially an original production. So I talked to them about budgeting and all that sort of thing, and it culminated in they were in small groups. They had to come up with a concept. They had to pick music. They had to come up with basic drill designs. They had to pick color guard costumes. The part that is always really entertaining to me is that they are each assigned a fictional high school with completely random instrumentation and a completely random budget. I think the biggest budget is like $30,000 and the smallest budget is $500. And they start to whine and they say, but this isn't fair. I'm like, neither is life. And that's because that's reality, you know. So
Sure.
Especially in Missouri, people forget that so much of our state is rural. They forget that. And so like a $500 budget for an entire marching season, that is very, very, very realistic.
Yeah.
So it kind of started with that particular project, and it sort of grew out of that because I saw what an impact that made with my students long term. You had less kids that were quitting marching band, and I think it's because they knew exactly what it was they were getting into. They understood, you know, how the sausage is made, so to speak. So what a big deal it was. Now I can't speak to whether or not some kids didn't do it in the first place because they knew what they were getting into, but we noticed that there was a lot less quitting, you know, the second day of band camp or whatever. So that kind of got me starting to thinking about, you know, okay, skills are important. Yes, rehearsal is important. And it was just trying to find a balance between how much time do we spend doing those days where we're not actually playing in class, but we're, you know, on J.W. Pepper looking for marching band music. How many days are we spending drilling scales versus searching for color guard costumes online? Right. Like the first year that I did it was just like, this is perhaps a bit unbalanced. You know, I'm not sure I executed it the right way the first time. But the cool byproduct of that, not just the kids having another basis of knowledge, but that really kind of set the stage for the idea of you can still do band things without just being in a traditional band rehearsal all the time, all day, every single day. And it transitioned beautifully when everything went virtual. I can't tell you how many people this past fall and even last spring were contacting me saying, hey, can I have everything that you do with your marching band unit for 8th grade? Because I have no idea what I'm going to do with these kids. So it's kind of a cool product.
Yeah, I could totally see that because, you know, any of those things that are, you know, someone's going to have to do some research and you're looking at uniforms, you're looking at music, and all that stuff that kids can do on their own devices and on their own time, or even as part of their class time, but they can do it without having to play along with others. I could totally see how that would be really beneficial. And there's like a value in it. Like it's a project, it's a scavenger hunt, like it's a thing that it's actually worth doing. So I could totally see why other people would try to rip that off once everything got moved online.
Borrowing, because that's what we do, right? In education, we're not stealing anything. We're not ripping off. It's all borrowing. And again, I was happy to give it because, you know, as we were talking before we started this, you know, so much of who we are as teachers is because of our influences and because of our mentors and because of our teachers. And same is true with this. I stole resources from other people and I said, hey, tell me about this. And so I picked people's brain. I was happy to already have that assembled to share with as many people as I could. I was happy to do so.
That's one of the great things about, you know, teachers. And I think that's how we've run our business at our stores. We've learned a lot from other types of music stores, but we've also, as we've learned a lot, we've put ourselves in a position to share. And I've trained people's store managers, like for other businesses, like we've done all kinds of collaborative things just to try to help others. And I think that kind of comes from that same mindset that you're talking about. You know, when your musicians are used to kind of chipping in and helping one another. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all that we continue that as educators or music store owners and those people as well. Like we just kind of keep that ethic working through. So have you developed then that idea further beyond just marching band? Like how have you structured other units or lesson plans in general for your middle school kids? I guess maybe even pre or during this online virtualization era, however you want to steer that question.
Sure. So I can say with that particular unit, a lot of things grew out of that because, and at most schools that do some sort of 8th grade night, there's there's some element of playing along with the high school band. Generally, what I've noticed that people do is they'll teach their 8th graders the high school fight song and some version of the Star Spangled Banner. Well, then you can, again, it's all about budgeting your time and how much time do you spend doing each one of those things. But you can also take that and talk about, well, what is a fight song? Why are we using that? You can just take it in that regard in terms of like, why is it so important to some people that they have a band at sports events and that sort of thing? Why is it important that we have a band at graduation? Why is it important? Why is live music important? So you can kind of take it in that direction too. And that sort of, as per our conversation earlier, I've kind of spurred that into the fact that virtual teaching in particular, you really have to be honest about what you can and can't do. So right now I'm teaching 1st and 2nd year players virtually, which is
not ideal.
It's the weirdest thing I think I've ever done.
Sure.
And like we're on a Zoom right now. I know we can't see it on a podcast, but like I'm sitting in this 5x5 corner of a random science classroom in my school. This is where I am all day
right.
long. Within an arm's reach, I have instruments and my drumstick and my drum pad is right here. Like, so I have everything that I can use kind of within an arm's reach. So with that, there's some very, very real limitations of what I can and can't do, right? If we're on a Zoom and it's block scheduled, so I'm on a Zoom for like 65 minutes and then a 20-minute, study hall time or whatever, I'm not going to be able to hear them authentically. I can have them unmute and play a couple things, and I can tell if they're on the right partials. I can tell if they're playing the right pitches. I can kind of tell if they're playing the right rhythm, but because of Wi-Fi and lag and the limitations of Zoom and how many people are in the class at one time, any manner of pulse is impossible. It's just impossible. You can't tell that. So and this is where like the big dose of reality comes in. The only time I authentically get to hear what my kids sound like is when they turn in some sort of video assignment, right? If they turn in a Flipgrid or, whatever it is that whatever platform you're using, that's the only time that I get to hear what they actually sound like, which is wild because I got beginners, So if a kid doesn't turn in their weekly assignment ever, or, they turn in one of the whole year, 2 weeks ago, I'm just like, well, the clarinet's backwards. Let's start there. It's March. So it's kind of wild. So there's things that I could correct in 3 seconds if we were in person that I can't do over Zoom. Then you run into privacy issues, and some parents are not willing to have their cameras on and all that. And I get it. I totally understand. I'm a parent. But again, so that means that I'm only listening to audio. So I'm not sure what's happening there. It sounds like a wrong fingering, but I don't really know. So to a very long answer to your question is I had to kind of think about, okay, what I normally would say these are the non-negotiables. You are going to learn this by the end of your 6th grade year. You kind of have to throw that out the window and just adjust your expectations as to what you're actually going to be able to do. So I really started thinking about how there are skills as a working musician that I have that I wasn't taught in college. You have to kind of learn it on the job, but they're probably going to be 21st century skills that these kids are going to need, not just if they decide to become a musician, but in general, they're probably going to have to know how to do this. So for example, for this quarter, my 6th and 7th grade classes have a series of projects that they can do instead of trying to put together a virtual ensemble. Because let's be honest, that's more work for me than it is for them.
Sure.
And I am not an audio engineer. I'm learning, but that's not my training. So it's projects that I've designed are more about very, very basics of audio engineering and how to pace a podcast and how do you fill a 10-minute amount of time with knowledge, like how much knowledge do you actually have to have on hand. There's one where kind of similar to the marching band one where they have to design something, they have to plan a concert. That's one of theirs. So I'll give them an imaginary budget and I'll show them J.W. Pepper and a bunch of sheet music sites and just say, all right, you have 30 minutes and you have $300. Go forth, and they have to kind of plan like what's the pacing of that and which one do you play first and what do you want to play? And oh, by the way, that's way too hard, that sort of thing.
I was getting ready to say that, like, cool, you spent half your budget on music that you actually can't play.
Play everything from the radio. Sorry. You have to, of course, and just kind of say, okay, one has to be a march, one has to be something slow, and that sort of thing. So those are all, when we talk about soft skills in the 21st century, those are soft skills. Being able to plan things, being able to like make that discernment of, oh, I probably shouldn't play 7 tunes that are all at 160. Mm-hmm. You know, now they're 11 and 12 years old, so that might be what we get anyway. Just real, but I mean, just getting them to think about that sort of thing and thinking about like large projects that take a lot of time to develop. I'm also doing a composition project that I lovingly borrowed, shall we say, not stole and not ripped off, but I lovingly borrowed it from a colleague of mine here in Parkway. So you just kind of think about what is it that I can teach them over a Zoom, because I can't teach those other things that are considered the 10 commandments of band. Thou shalt play a B flat scale. That might not happen, and you just kind of think about what is it that you can do given a situation where you can't do so much.
Yeah. I mean, I think what a lot of people have struggled with is for some of the districts where they are doing virtualization, band isn't even necessarily required, or their participation isn't really required. And so now not only are you not teaching the B flat scale, but they're also not learning anything. And so trying to at least challenge that so they're getting some value out of participating and being involved in band, even if it's not the amount of face time that they're accustomed to having on their instrument, that they're still getting something. I think that's so fantastic that you're being intentional about how you handle that. How do you think this lack of time on the instrument is going to affect your ensembles, and maybe even more specifically the high school ensembles going forward after this? How do you think high school directors are going to have to adjust?
It's interesting. Well, and I'm very fortunate. The high school colleagues that I have, we've had conversations about this, and just they're very real about what's coming up. It's just great kids and hard workers, but they're not going to have the technical skills. They're likely not going to have the technical skills that they might have in an ordinary year. I think a lot of high school directors in general, and I think I can speak to the St. Louis area for sure as a whole, we're kind of all in the same boat here. And I think you're going to have a lot of high school directors who are suddenly very, very interested in what method books their middle schools are using, if they're not already. So I think I get the feeling that in the next couple of years, a lot of high school directors are going to have to kind of incorporate things and skill building techniques that middle school teachers have always done. They're going to have to figure out how to incorporate that into their everyday. And who knows, that might transform what they are doing up there. I'm going to say this is a gross generalization of a lot of high school directors, with the caveat that I have taught high school, so I get it. I totally understand this. I think sometimes the expectation of people who are only teaching high school band is that by the time those middle school students get up there, they should already know this. They should already be able to do this. They should inherently know every single music term and be able to play all 12 major scales, full range of the instrument. I think sometimes that's the expectation, and there's a little bit of, well, why is this not happening? I think they're about to realize what a process that is to make that happen. Mm-hmm. So the things that, we may not be able to teach everything, but we're able to teach a lot. And I think it's going to take a few years to, and I hate to use the word recover, because what are we recovering from, but I think it's going to take a few years for that to flatten out and for things to get back to whatever normal is.
I've often felt that, this will be a little sacrilegious possibly, but stressing on our kids knowing like all 12 keys and scales is not particularly useful, because it's very, very difficult to learn something if you don't get the opportunity to apply it. And I think would be so much more beneficial to think like, okay, in middle school and maybe in your freshman year of high school, what keys are you likely to encounter? And let's make sure that you know those pretty thoroughly, because, as a trumpet player, when I learn the C flat major scale or the C sharp major scale, not particularly useful to me because I never, ever, ever play in those keys. And the same thing with F sharp and, a host of other keys. I should know more than B flat and F and, some of those kind of things. But, if I'm learning the scale and then don't play any music that really involves that key or scale, it's going to just go away. I'm not learning it. I just knew it for a moment and then forgot it. So
scales, because I think even 5 years ago, had I heard you say that, we would have been at fisticuffs. I would have been reaching through the screen and let me at him, But that's I am on the same page as you completely now. Because again, even as a professional musician, how often am I playing pieces in G major? Mm-hmm. That's not something that I do very often.
Right. Yeah. And how much time is it worth really spending on developing that? Kids should see it, should know it. They should know how to learn it for sure. But to spend a lot of time trying to hammer that scale home that they're not going to see again may not be that useful.
I think it's just a question of being economical with your time. What are the things what are your non-negotiables? What are the things that what are the hills that you're going to die on in terms of teaching skills to kids? Is it going to be scales? Is it going to be dynamics? Is it going to be articulations? Because I know a lot of people that articulations are they are absolutely everything. So it's about not only who you are as a teacher, what your strengths are in teaching, but be honest about the kids that you're teaching. Kids are kids anywhere, but there are different communities that are going to value different aspects of playing an instrument. So you got to read the room and figure out what's going to be relevant and what's going to be the most useful to your your kids, for sure.
You nailed it. Being relevant and most useful. I think if a director was sitting down and first thinking all right, what are my non-negotiables? They would probably immediately come up with things that could easily be challenged. They'd come up with they should know in middle school, they should know all their major scales and minor scales. And you could come up with all these things, but is that really useful? Would they be better off knowing the major scales and minor scales of the 3 or 4 most common keys? What about the most common arpeggios for those? I love you mentioned articulations. What if they knew the 20% of articulations that was in 80% of the music they're going to see? What if they knew that? What if musical terms? What if they knew 20% of the musical terms that you see 80% of the time? Gosh, if they came out and just had those things, they would probably be ready for high school.
I think so too. And there are some people that will say that approach is a very jack of all trades, master of none approach. But again,
that's what we're doing.
Again, what is it that you want? Do you want them to be awesome at specifically one thing and then suck at everything else? Is that what you want?
You want them to be awesome at playing scales?
To go back to your earlier question, I think there are some, not all, and like I said, gross generalization here. There are some high school directors that are going to figure that aspect of things out very, very soon, because we as middle school directors have had to do that for years, and some kids get all of that, and some kids only focus on one of those things. And so I think that's the blood, sweat, and tears of the vetting process to get kids to the high school level. I think that's the piece that a lot of high school directors are going to kind of get to know intimately in the next few years. And again, I say that I love all my high school director friends, and so many of them are very, very actively involved with their own middle school programs. And of course, that's the way that it should be. Not a knock at all. I was in that same situation, but I think it's going to become very, very clear what all the polishing that I suppose happens at the middle school level.
I think high school directors in particular need to get ready, because the nice thing with a middle school director, especially if it's one that doesn't also assist up at the high school level, your band's going to be affected by this as well, but only for a couple of years. They're moving out, the new ones are coming in. You see your kids for 3 years on average. So it's not this isn't going to be with you a long time, whereas the high school director has those kids for 4 years. And so we kind of had like a year and a half of all the COVID instruction era type stuff. And so that's going to sort of ride through their program for a while. And if a director is in one of those programs where they are doing middle school and high school, like those kids, they got to have a plan. How are we going to bring these kids a little further along so that we don't see our musical quality or musical performance kind of dip down long term because of this era of instruction?
And I think, too, to kind of go along with that, there's a lot of talk about, I just have to make sure my kids aren't behind and we have to maintain a standard. And, I kind of want to slap them and just be like, you realize everybody's in this boat, right? Like, it's not just your program. COVID isn't only affecting you. Like, it's affecting everybody. So when you're freaking out about the fact that, the quality of the entire program is going down, the quality of everybody's program is going down. So get over yourself. Calm down.
That is true. And maybe this is just because like my business background, and in business, there's always someone who's figuring it out.
Sure.
And in my experience with various high school programs and programs just in general, there's going to be someone who's going to figure it out. Like, yep, this is now our work just got harder, but we're going to figure this thing out. And there'll be a lot that won't. And everyone certainly has a great excuse for not, because it's been very difficult and no one would blame you for it. But there's gonna be those people that are gonna figure out, like, all right, how do we do this? Are we gonna do summer school for band students? Are we gonna do some kind of after school thing? Are we gonna, like, they're gonna come up with some way. Someone is gonna come up with some way to be able to maintain the quality that they're accustomed to and not have this affect them.
And I do think too, when we go back to what are our non-negotiables, I do feel like there is a shift that is happening, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. Just in terms of, it's not so much adding more to it, but just thinking also, I can tell you as a flute player all throughout my college years, I don't think I really thought a whole lot about recording quality. I don't think I thought a whole lot about, how am I going to edit this audio clip so that I don't hear the 30 seconds of me walking onto the stage or whatever. Like I didn't think about any of that. That wasn't my focus. That's not my job, but yes, it is.
Where's the artistry in that? Yeah.
That's not my focus. That's absolutely something that we have to think about.
Sure.
Just getting kids to think about, well, why is it I have to sit right here? Why can't I sit with my best friend? And okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the physics of that. About the the blend, and let's talk about not only that, you can't shut up when you're by your friend in the French horn section, so we're going to leave you over here, but my friends aren't here. I don't care.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, those are honest questions. I think in the past that we would have just looked at the kid and said, because I said so. But I mean, I think kids today they'll do a lot of what you want them to do. They'll pretty much do whatever you want them to do. But answer their question, I think
sure.
Often as teachers and as parents too, let's be honest, it's just do it because I told you to. But if they ask a question, fine, tell them. Because half the time, if you give them an explanation that even remotely makes sense to them, they go, oh, okay. And then they'll do it anyway. That's all they want to know. They just want a little bit of justification. And I don't think that's unfair.
Yeah, not at all. I love though what you're doing though with trying to, you're replacing some of the content you've taught historically with new content. And so these kids that leave your program, or at least leave your grade, may not have been in the same level, maybe in like their performance, their musical playing that they were before. Maybe now they're here, just to pick a thing. But maybe now their knowledge of other aspects of music or recording or performance or development or any of the other things that maybe used to be down here, maybe even non-existent, is now kind of up to here or above or kind of wherever. And so from my experience as both a parent and someone who's regularly involved with music education, I've seen some places where, okay, well, our musical ability has dropped from here to here, and that's it. Like, hasn't been replaced or supplemented with anything. And what you're talking about is you're like, okay, this has happened. I can't do anything about that. So I'm now going to supplement their knowledge with some other thing so that I'm still getting up to that number, the fullness I had before, but just doing it in a different way.
Yeah, so I mean, if their skills aren't up to par, can I at least bring those other skills that are not necessarily always developed? Can I bring those level? And you're talking here to here, and on a podcast they can't see your hand. But yeah,
it's also a YouTube video, so it will be both. You're right, but you were right. Anyone who's just listening, I had my hands up and down like bar graphs, and it was made for terrible radio. So.
But yes, you're absolutely correct. And I kind of had to, for my own sanity too, for my own just, so I'm not losing my mind thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not teaching anything that I normally would have. I'm not getting anything product that I would have in the past. For my own sanity, I have to feel like I'm actually teaching them something, even if it's not what I would have taught in the past. Just take something from my class. Take something. So.
Yeah. This has got to be, I want this to be valuable to you. And in some respects, some of what you're sharing could be more valuable to them in the long run, even than just, knowing all of their scales on their flute. The technical knowledge about, how to organize and prepare for something and podcasting and things like that. That could be more relevant in the future than even what we do.
I could have used that skill long before my adult life. Let's just say. Like how to think about organizing an event and thinking about the timeline, and that I could have used that information much earlier in my life. That would have been very, very helpful. Yeah.
Well, maybe if you run out of that, maybe you can also talk about like personal accountability, personal finance, budgeting, because those are other things that people could probably use. You are covering the budgeting though, and when you're given that, so you're helping with that for sure.
I'm helping them out big time on those projects that involve budgeting, because I'm giving them a generous one. I'm giving them a fairly generous one so they can, buy whatever you want to your heart's desire. There's no tax. There's no shipping. It's fine.
That's true.
Just the raw thing. I mean, I tried to explain tax to my 8-year-old the other day because we were shopping, and so she sees a price tag and how much does this and how much is this, and so she figured out how much it was going to cost. And then I said, now when we get to the register, it's not going to be that amount. It's going to be more. Well, why is that? So I'm trying to explain how taxes work to an 8-year-old, and yeah.
How'd that go?
She once I kind of explained, we pay more when we buy things so that we can have things like roads that look nice and parks that are clean. And she was just like, oh, okay. And so then she decided, I can't remember what the amount was, but it was, like $37. And first of all, it's, Mom, do we have $37? Yes, we have $37. We're good. But then she said, I think I'll pay $2 in tax. Like, she thought it was voluntary. She thought it was you could name, it's very socialist. I can name how much I'm going to donate to our park program. I'm like, that's very sweet, but that's not necessarily how it works. But she's figuring it out. She's, but she's funny.
That's awesome. So in terms of this, virtualization and, gosh, you've had so much experience now kind of specializing in that over the last year. What are some other tips and tricks that you've learned to share with other folks? Because it may be that, this is all kind of winding down and going away, but it may be that it comes back, or it may be that some element of this must still exist. So to do it to the best possible ability we can certainly makes sense.
Well, I first of all, I'll never claim that I'm doing it the best. Like, I am still learning every single day and figuring things out. In some aspects, in a lot of aspects, being fully virtual, I feel like a first-year teacher. There are some things that sometimes I get to the end of the day, I'm just like, I don't even know if anybody learned anything today. And that's just the nature of it. I can also tell you that my own situation is not the reality for a lot of people that have virtual, because they're trying to do in-person and virtual at the same time, which you'll probably edit this out and that's fine, but that is a private hell that I can't even fathom that. I can't speak to that except for bless you people who are doing that. You are doing God's work. Yes. What I will say is that, again, the biggest thing is expectations. Be real with your expectations. And understand that you are not in a rehearsal. And I think that's the biggest mistake that some people are making when they're trying to make virtual band the same as a rehearsal. Put your baton away Nobody cares about that right now. So, get your instrument out, do a warm up with your kids. You have to believe them when they say things like, oh, my Wi-Fi is lagging, because you don't know what's going on at their house. Got to give the kids a lot of grace, because if they say that they're out of reeds, you can't hand them a new one, right? The things that we would do to sort of parent and mother them when they were in person, you can't do that virtually. So you have to, it's all about communication, both with them and then also with their parents. Because to kind of go back to your question, I don't think virtual is going away completely. I just don't. Virtual has been, and again, I won't speak on specifics for this, but I know that a virtual option has been to some extent required in the state for a while. I won't speak to how many years, but it was meant for core classes at the secondary level for unique situations, like a kid has some sort of illness that is requiring them to be homebound, so they have to be able to complete coursework online. That option obviously exploded during COVID, but now that parents know that that is an option, I don't think that it's going away, because there are some kids, and it's not many kids, but there are some kids who do truly thrive in a virtual environment. So it's not going away. You have to be honest about what it is and what it isn't. It's all about communication. Be clear with your parents, be clear with your students about what your expectations are, and follow through with that. The newest thing on Zoom that kids are doing to try to get away with is if their if their camera is off and their mic is off, which is like most of the time for everything. If you look at them and say, hey, can you unmute and play those 5 notes for me or whatever, and suddenly you have no options, they've disconnected from audio. So they can legitimately say, oh, I didn't hear you. Like later on they can say, I didn't hear you calling my, yeah, because you disconnected from audio. Like that's the new one. That's the one that's been discovered this week, is where kids don't want to do something, so they'll just disconnect from audio, because then they can't hear you. But be honest, you can't control that. They're
No.
And because of the fact that I don't think it's going away, and there are a lot of different reasons that somebody might pick virtual for their student. You got to have that relationship with parents, and it might be through email, it might be through a phone call. It's kind of a forced relationship. It's like, okay, you're going to pick this option, you're going to hear from me a lot, but you would rather have that than have them just fail and never ever talk to their parents and never contact them, and I hate the term call out, but that's what it is. If the kid's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, if you never call that out, then the parent doesn't know. So it's just, be real about your expectations, be real about what virtual music teaching is, and be real about what it can't be. That's kind of
our youngest son, he's in middle school, and he's a tuba player. He's in 7th grade, and he goes to the same middle school that my wife teaches at.
A new tuba player, right? Did I hear that on a previous podcast?
Yeah. Well, he started in 6th grade, so he's been playing a year and a half. And but what's hysterical is he'll sometimes try to get away with stuff at school as if his mother doesn't work there. And so there's so many times where something comes up, and of course, like, one of the other teachers is going to reach out to Belinda and be like, hey, don't know if you know this, but Maddox hasn't turned any homework this semester, or whatever it is, and like, buddy, come on, what are you doing? And as a parent, and I think maybe we're more empathetic to teachers and have been, because she is one, and I know them all so well, but we've always appreciated when teachers keep us in the loop. But the problem, I know there's some parents that don't. I hear the stories Belinda will tell me about. She told me one time that she had a problem with the kid, and so she was like, hey, like, if you don't straighten up, I'm gonna have to call your mom. And the kid's like, wow, whatever, don't care. And so she calls the mom, and the mom's like, so wait a minute, you're telling me that you have an issue with my son, and when did this happen? And Belinda was like, well, it's happened several times, but the latest time is today. What time did it happen? It's like, well, it's during band. Well, what time is that? I was like, 1:30. It's during the school day, right? And Belinda's like, yes. And then she's like, well, if it's at school, it's your problem, it's not mine, and just like,
right. That is correct. I come across that kind of an alteration of that. One of the things that we do to create community in a Zoom classroom, which those are the most ludicrous things I think I've said in the past 3 years. How do you create community in a Zoom classroom? But one of the things that we do is when the Zoom starts, there's always that awkward time where kids are showing up and, they're stuck between the waiting room and the actual room or whatever. I've got music playing, and there's always a Spotify playlist or whatever. But that's one of the first assignments that we do each quarter. That's actually what I'm assigning this week is tell me what you want to hear. What's going to be on our class Spotify playlist? And then you put it all together. You can send them the link with the caveat, and this kind of relates to what you were talking about, with the caveat of it must be school appropriate. And so with these kids today, they'll interpret that as, oh, well, it's the clean version. It's just like, that is true, but let's talk about the subject matter. Like, I don't care if there are no swear words in it, but if talking about something inappropriate, you obviously can't use that. Well, how do we know it's inappropriate? And so I put it to him this way. I said, okay, if I go to some website that has the lyrics to this song that you want me to put on our school playlist, if I copy all of the lyrics and I put it in an email and just wordlessly with no explanation send it to your mother, is that an appropriate conversation? And they kind of stop and they think about it and they're just like, I don't want you talking to my mom like that. I'm like, well, then there you go. Like that is an inappropriate kind of song. But then
So we will not have Wet and Gushy on the school playlist, apparently. Then I gotcha. I'll take that off.
Sorry,
yeah, that basically rules out the entire Cardi B catalog.
Got some kids that are just like, go ahead. I listened to that song with my mom. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Like, what's going on? So you have situations where it's, and that's a difference in cultures, a difference in values, and that's not my call to make as a teacher, but I just have to kind of set boundaries and set parameters of whatever. They get creative though. There's one kid that submitted something for a playlist. And I allowed it. I probably shouldn't have allowed this, but this is who I am as a person. They sent me a song and it was inappropriate. And I sent it back to him and I went, I can't, because the lyrics and everything. And he said, okay, hold on. And so he went and found an instrumental version of this song. Like same backing and everything, but instead of whatever singer it was just like a piano, like playing the melody. And I was just like, you know what? Points for style. And so what the playlist, like, because the same justification is to like, why can we play certain things in band if the lyrics are inappropriate? Well, we're not singing it, fine, whatever. I'm going to give you points for style, kid. Probably shouldn't admit that in case my boss actually ends up listening to this.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, you're rewarding resourcefulness, and I think it's totally fair. As soon as you started saying that, I thought, oh, I bet I know where this is going. Smart kid.
Yeah, kid found an instrumental version of something that I would never, ever play for anybody that I ever know. But when it's just the instrumental, it's not so bad,
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
That kid feels like he got away with something. It's just like, oh, okay.
Pulled one over on you. Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
This has been really good. There's a lot of great stuff here. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to make sure we covered today?
Let's see. I think I talked a little bit. I'm going to hit the 5 projects that I'm going to do with my virtual kids this particular quarter. And some of them, it might be a little bit indulgent on my part, and I don't care. I'm making this up as I go along. So my kids this quarter, I teach 6. I have 3 6th grade. I have 6th grade sections and a 7th grade section, and they all have the same projects. Of course, the requirements are different by grade and that sort of thing. But they have to do 2 projects, and I gave them a choice of 5 different ones. So the first one is you have to do a duet or a trio with somebody in our same class or in one of my classes using a site called easyvirtualchoir.com. It is quite possibly the easiest way to do a virtual ensemble that I have ever seen, and it's free and it works on Chromebooks. It's the best. So easyvirtualchoir.com. One of their options is they can do a duet with somebody or a trio. I don't care. With somebody in our class on that. That's option 1. Option 2 is that they can do the plan a concert thing where I give them a budget and I give them a bunch of resources and guidelines and say you have to play this and you have to play this and difficulty is this and so on. Option 3 is a composition project that I am lovingly borrowing from my colleague Keely Ablin over at Parkway South Middle School. She's amazing, and she comes up with all these really, really inventive and creative lessons that I borrow and adapt, and she's just awesome. So they can do a composition, and for that one we use Noteflight, again, a free website that is a notation software that we'll do a couple lessons on, and then I tell them go forth and be creative. And then option 4 and option 5, I'm kind of curious to see how these go, because they both use WeVideo. WeVideo has a podcast option. And so one of the options is a 10-minute podcast about something music or band related. I have one kid who's planning on doing something about, do we really need to use non-chipped reeds? So I was just like, okay, have fun. Like we'll talk about how you're going to research that, but you're not going to prove the point that you want to put what you want to prove. Like, this kid wants to prove the point that he can use a chipped reed, and like, okay, like, we'll go down this path, but you're not going to come to the answer that you think you will. So it's like parameters of, you have to fill 10 minutes, and here's how you time it, and here's how you splice it, and you can bring somebody else on there if you want to, but make sure it's a conversation. I'm probably going to use this podcast as an example of what a conversation podcast looks like versus here is my part, here is my part, that's what middle school kids do. The last one is a longer one, still using the WeVideo podcast option, but they actually have to design a radio show. So they have to pretend that they are a DJ for whatever radio station. They have to come up with a 30-minute show, come up with a genre. What genre are you the DJ for? Like, what's your favorite type? I have one kid that's probably going to do a 30-minute K-pop thing. That's fine. I don't care. But think about what order you want to put those songs in, and what do you want to say about them? What kind of background information do you want to give us about the songs that you're doing? That one's a bit self-indulgent, because my significant other has a radio show on a local radio station here in St. Louis. And so he's actually going to come in and talk to the kids about, here's how I put my show together, and here's how I put songs in the right order, and that sort of thing. So that might be self-indulgent, but it's reality. It's programming. It's all real life skills. So those are my 5 big things that we're doing for this particular quarter. A lot of people, I think, would scoff and turn up their noses about the fact that only one of them is actually playing their instruments. And it's just like, you're right, because those are not skills that I can accurately develop right now. But I can teach them how to plan things. I can teach them how to budget. I can teach them a little bit about, audio engineering and editing, and those might be more relevant skills in the future for them.
Well, I think a lot of directors are at this crossroads right now where they can either decide that they're going to continue to beat their head against the wall, or they're going to try another path. And certainly if someone has figured out the way to do virtual band live rehearsals and stuff like that, like, reach out to me so we can share that, because I think that's something we all want to know. But I think most are in the position that you're in, that it's very difficult to accomplish that. I know in smaller groups, I don't know if this would work in a bigger group or not, but I know I've heard of in smaller groups, and I'm thinking more specifically, like, I know people that are doing this with group lesson programs, where they're providing like a backing track, and then the backing track is being played by the host, and then everyone is muted but playing along with the track. And I think something like that could be really useful if that was developed for band, possibly. And you certainly would have some issues where if students didn't have suitable internet to be able to stream music that way. But, enough of them would probably have enough of that where they could play along with it, especially if they had headphones or something like that. But
what you're describing is exactly what my warm-ups and the actual band part of my classes looks like. I don't know if I have screen sharing options right now, but if I do, I can show you exactly what it is that we do.
See if you can.
Sure, for sure. Pulling up my Essential Elements Interactive, which is what we're using right now. I'll share my computer screen with you. So this is what we're working on in 6th grade band right now. Of course, EEI is a fantastic resource. You get the book, and then there's an activation code in it, and it gets you all pretty much everything that you have in the book, plus click tracks that have different styles and all that sort of thing or whatever. So this is what we're working on right now. Basically what happens for our warm-up, when I play it through the computer, I can't play along with it live because there's an audio feed that comes through my mic, but then there's also my computer sound. So you have two different streams of audio coming through Zoom at the same time, and it doesn't really work very well at all. So what we do is, like, when we start off, I'll have a metronome just on my phone like this, like here in the room, because that, if I have a metronome here and my flute going, that's my audio, then you can hear it together. But if it's trying to do it with a click track, it doesn't work, and it lags and all that sort of stuff. So what we do for our warm up, I'll say, okay, we're going to be on we're on line 52. We're doing the tone builder. I've got the melody on, so I'm going to go ahead and press start, and then it gives you 4 clicks and we're in. So this is literally what happens. I've got the page up. It's all shared. Okay, all right, everybody get ready. It gives you 4 clicks and we're in, and then I mute myself. Anyway, you get the idea. So they physically see me playing along with them, but that's how we have to do a lot of it. Just if I have to demonstrate something and I want them to hear me, I can't do it with the click track or whatever that's on my computer. Some people get really fancy with this, and they'll have, they'll do it through their phone, and the phone is hooked up through this big amplifier, and so you can hear it live. And that's great if that's what you want to do. For me, I'm switching back and forth between things happening in the room and whatever's happening on my computer. I do that so fast that it's just better for me to go with one system and sort of stick with that. But that's
right.
What you described, that is when we're actually doing skill building and all that sort of stuff, that is precisely what's happening. And it sucks because all the kids are muted. You can't do that. And depending on the size of the class, if I say, okay, hey, can you unmute and play those 5 notes for me? I got one class of 32 kids. Like, that takes 20 minutes for me to hear them go do, 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 do. That's it,
Yep.
And it takes them longer to, like, okay, here we go. Now my camera's on. Where's my clarinet? Like, it takes forever. And so, I don't want to say that it's a waste of time to do that, but it eats up a whole lot of time. And again, I can't hear them authentically. So what you just described, that's precisely what we're doing. It's a lot of just, all right, play along with me. I sure hope you're doing it at home, and I can't control that,
No, you can't. Have you increased the amount of like recordings and recorded submissions this year beyond what you've done in the past, so you can hear them but not have to do it necessarily during class time?
Yeah, so I have to give credit where credit is due here. When I came to Parkway Northeast Middle School, my colleague Mike Steep has been here for, I think, 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, who knows? Maybe he's been here for 80 and I just don't know it. But the system that he had established when I got here was very much like, here are our checkoffs, or here are our playing tests, and we're going to do them in class. You can do them whenever, but they're due by the end of the semester. And really that meant that some kids were doing them once a week, once every 2 weeks. Some kids were waiting until the end of the semester and cramming them all in there. But that's really the only time, right? That's really the only time that we would have like a video of just them. But that wasn't a big deal because I saw them every single day. And so hey, you play line 54, and I could hear that. So I kind of do the same approach now, but it's very much this is your weekly submission. Like, the one thing, again, it comes back to your non-negotiables. What is it that you truly want to get out of them? Do you want to hear them do 5 lines, or do you just want to hear them play 16th notes? Because if you just want to hear them play 16th notes, that's a 30-second video that they can do, and that counts as an assignment. You can hear them authentically. That there's so much that you can do with that. Now that's only once a week, And if I'm really caught up on my grading, I can get that done once a week. But sometimes it goes a couple weeks. Yeah.
Shame.
Right. So it's kind of the same, but it's more structured. So I still have kids that won't turn anything in until the very, very end of the quarter. I think that's kids in general. That's not pandemic kids or kids specifically at my school. That's every child everywhere. And
adults. I do the same thing. I have to have a deadline. I work better. I mean, I've gone through like those work aptitude testing and stuff like that. I'm the kind of person that needs a deadline. So
even if you miss the deadline and you turn in later, like the fact that the deadline is there, that's what helps you. Yeah.
I'm good with deadlines. It's pretty rare that I'll miss something, but I kind of have to have it. It doesn't work otherwise. I think the thing I love about that too, that you with doing the recording and again, my almost 100% my experience of listening to students' recordings comes off of just overhearing what Belinda is grading or whatever when she's at home. But every time within 3 seconds, I could have graded that kid. I don't need to hear this whole thing. I've heard everything I need to hear in the first 3 notes. And so there's no, 5 lines probably isn't as important, as it is like, hey, just play this measure, play these 2 measures, like 2 to 4 measures, 1 line, whatever it is you want. You'll hear everything you need right there. And if they, are getting their instrument down or not.
Judging is the same way. I do a lot of judging, like seating a flute section for a suburban band, or I help coordinate the flute section for the all-state band. Everything, it's the same way. I hate to say this as a gross generalization again, but I know by the time I hear their scales, right? Yep. But that's right. Again, it comes down to, what are your non-negotiables? What is it that you truly need to hear from them? And with middle school in particular, I need to hear 1 line. I need to hear 1 line of you doing this. And then I can tell you whether you need to work on it again, or if you're doing what you need to do.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And younger teachers, I think, struggle with that too, because they're just like, oh, I want to, maybe they'll get it if I do 2 lines. I'm like, no, they won't. And, younger teachers will struggle with that a little bit, I think.
Sure. Well, it just takes experience. It takes experience and familiarity to kind of know how to navigate it.
Can you imagine being a first-year teacher right now? I mean, I'm a veteran teacher, and I feel like a first-year teacher sometimes this year. But I can't imagine those young educators right now that this is their first year of teaching, and it's just like, why would you come back? This is so hard. It
is. I almost kind of wonder, though. I think it's all how you look at it, right? Because on the one hand, it's difficult, no doubt. On the other hand, there's kind of no blame right now. Like you've got this playground and a lab that you can experiment with, and sort of no one's judging you. On the one hand, I think it could be a great time to be a first-year teacher.
Yeah, or creating things in a virtual environment, because we don't know what's going to stick and what doesn't. It's funny you say that. I was talking with some of my students today, and again, they don't want to unmute. They don't want to hear themselves, but they will explode that chat if you let them. And one kid said, we kind of have an advantage where we were taught completely as beginners over Zoom. Who else gets to say that? Like they're wearing it as a badge of honor. And then, I didn't really think about that, but you're right. Like everybody else, even like my current 7th graders, they had most of the year last year where it was in person, but man, our beginners, we started them on a Zoom. And so like there's kind of, this kid's point was just like, who else gets to say that they started playing an instrument, only over a Zoom? And I'm just like, you know what? You're right. You're completely correct in that regard.
Right. Yeah.
Honor. Good for you.
Yeah, exactly.